Well, personal transformation is always involving spirituality, but it's not exactly religious. And I think we're at a unique point in history where we can combine some of the ancient wisdom and religious and spiritual traditions with the insights and know-how of, I'll call it 20th century, maybe 21st century psychotherapy. And so we have an opportunity to move through some of our deepest suffering in ways that offer us transformational, that is to say, unexpected possibilities. Bob Hoffman discovered something he named the negative love syndrome. So everyone wants more love, but we are doing these crazy things that are counterproductive, that actually, in the name of what we want, love, we end up getting the opposite of what we want. The source of it is that when we were children, without a mediating intellect, and we needed love, we needed to bond with our parents, especially our mothers, for our very survival, we bonded with them in whatever emotions she offered or he offered. And if you're a little boy, you try to figure out what does it mean to be a man. You model yourself after your daddy and so forth. If daddy was an angry guy, let's say, for example, a child can become an angry man. These decisions are made, there are a certain number of emotional decisions that are made early in life and then forgotten. They're hidden behind a curtain of forgetting. And they're like dark laws that we enact into our lives. And we have no idea where they're coming from. We just think that's the way I am. And, you know, I think the symbol, the Eastern spiritual symbol of the lotus is instructive here, because the lotus blossom is the awakening, symbol of awakening human consciousness. And its roots go down into the mud. You know, it's a saying, no mud, no lotus. So what I want to talk about, or what I want to speak about and illuminate a little bit, is a connection between our suffering and transformation. And it's a place, certainly, that in modern Western civilization, well, what I most well know, the United States, people are doing everything in their power to escape their suffering through acquisitions and experiences and being different than, rebelling against. So it's a lot of the people, you know, the upper 1%, the upper 10th of 1% are some of the people most desperately trying to insulate themselves from pain. But it's just not possible. It's just not possible. It seems to me that things are at such a point right now that we have to get some things right. You know, the whole planet is at stake, so to speak. And not just so to speak, it actually is the case. Although I think that our parents, my dad and mom, in World War II, they felt like the whole world was at stake then too. So we're probably not the first ones to encounter this. But I think we need to respond as fully as they did. And we need to get the whole world on board with this response. And we have to understand that sacrifices will have to be made. When someone has a powerful personal transformation, it is experienced as a spiritual enlightenment, awakening, epiphany, you know, where you have a real awakening. And when what one awakens to, invariably, is that your nature, your deepest, innermost nature, is love. And that is also the sum and substance of the universe. Matter and spirituality are intertwined. This is what one awakens to. And when one sees that, This then becomes a guiding light for the actions that also need to be taken to change, the outer world. And when one is operating from one's deepest nature of love and compassion and belonging, caring, and I'll add gratitude in there too. Then one is operating at one with the universe itself. There is a power in the universe that is at play, that is animating everything we see. In Japan with their Zen rock gardens, the rocks, spirits have rocks in them too. I mean, rocks have spirits in them too. And so spirit is everywhere. There's no place that doesn't exist. And when we're operating from our own spirit, then we're working at one with the universe instead of at odds with the universe, and it moves from a much more powerful place. The universe is both a multitude, of dualities, many, many forms, and it's also oneness. So paradoxically, it's both. And so we say non-violence instead of peace. And if you follow the non-violent precept, yes, then you're operating into the world from a place within yourself of nonviolence, a place within yourself that is love, and that will always accede to the higher power that love brings. Now, I want to put a note of caution on that. The prophet is someone who it's a Gandhi, it's a Martin Luther King, and so forth. This is a person who is standing for people who can't stand for themselves, who can't stand up for themselves, and is willing to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune for doing so. And, you think of this image of Gandhi who, was like a 90-pound weakling in a little loincloth, right? I mean, he's a really skinny, small guy. But he made the British Empire fall to its knees. How did that happen? How could one person embody that amount of spiritual energy? Well, the answer is that he was just a channel for what was already there in everyone else, including in the British. And so he, touched the nerve, so to speak. And that's what we're talking about when we're operating from that spiritual essence. And it's not about believing in something. Maybe believing has a place in it, but it's a reality, connecting with that reality. We have all had experiences where everything's, maybe for a day, everything seems to go our way. If you watch or play sports, you know that there's a moment when a team can get in the flow. A business team can get in the flow. And when that flow state is optimized, everything moves very quickly and effectively. So the answer here lies in the fact that what we're trying to get at is greater than ourselves. It cannot be held in the intellect. And so where is it held? Well, in Hoffman, we say that the human being exists on 4 dimensions simultaneously. Yes, the physical body, the intellect, the emotions, and spirit. So these are 4 dimensions that are existing interactively and interreactively. So often we just get into our intellect. One of the things is to be able to recognize it. And you recognize it by having these emotional states, mood states, that fill you up with energy. So for example, anger exists in a certain, will localize in a, I'm not just talking about righteous anger, righteous indignation like we should all be feeling right now about the state of our home, of planet Earth, and the suffering that's coming on to so many people, millions and millions of people. We should feel anger when our government is operating outside the bounds of our Constitution. So that is, we should feel that indignation, but we don't have to act out of it. So negative emotions tend to localize in our body. They localize in our chest or our gut or our head, whereas the emotions of flow fill our bodies. So gratitude, you can't find it any place in your body. It just fills your whole body. Love, compassion, and so on fill our bodies. And so one of the most important linkages from going to a normal state to an extra normal state or a non-ordinary state of reality, which is what we call about the flow state, or when you're really connected up, is compassion. Compassion is the link between love and suffering. Compassion is an adult emotion that includes love and presence at the same time it's including the suffering. And compassion was discovered simultaneously about 2,500 years ago in the East with the Buddha, in a more, his prescription was a more contemplative way of accessing it. The Greeks discovered it, and they put it, the access was through a spiritual device, a theatrical device called the Greek theater. And so they accessed spirit through suffering, through tragedy. Well, so the whole Western tradition, spiritual wisdom tradition, for the last 2,500 years, goes from Greeks to Judaism to Christianity, and they all have, at their essence, accessing the divine through suffering and transforming it into spiritual power. So that is really our Western tradition, and it's a tradition of action, combining non-action, the inner self, with action into the world. And of course, the Greek tradition of the theater is showing how all the breakdowns that can come, and that do invariably come from action in the world, from the tragic collapse of the ego, leads to a transcendent. I studied theater when I was at the university. I was at UC Berkeley, and there was a man named Bill Oliver who I admired greatly. And I never forgot the day in one of our classes where he said, "Your ego is the only thing strong enough to get you to walk out on the stage. And once you're out there, it's the only thing that's in your way. It's the only thing you need to let go of." And so the ego, I said that by way of pointing at the ego. We all need a healthy ego. We all need a sense of self in order to move through the world. But then the ego cannot do magic. It cannot move into the flow state. And that's where you need to go. You need to go from I, me and you, to I and thou, so that you are not Rob, but you're a thou to me. You're something sacred. I experience you subjectively instead of as a separate being. And when we can move into that state of belonging to ourselves, belonging to the universe, belonging to each other, it empowers all of our actions. And so it's something we seek. What comes to mind, this will only take a moment, is I think there's a 12th century Zen master, very famous. I think it's called Dogen, D-O-G-E-N, at least that's the English translation. And he said something like this: to study the Buddha way is to study the self. When you study the self, the self disappears. When the self disappears, you are at one with 10,000 things. 10,000 things means all reality in 12th century Zen talk. The idea that we can make a difference, that we must make a difference, will get us on the stage. Will get us into the course of action, and then we need to monitor ourselves, and we need to seek our own inner wisdom. We need to not think we're right, or just because we're right, we then have the right to do anything we want. All the worst things that we're fighting against, people did in the name of bringing energy to humanity, giving us freedom, creating resources so that we could build a better world, all these kinds of things. And so now, we have to find a completely new system of operating, and we have a very limited amount of time for doing that. So seek and find gratitude, compassion, belonging. So meditate, go inward, seek guidance. Everyone wants to be more open-hearted, but human beings are the kind of creatures that open their hearts often through having their hearts broken open. And then the impulse is, how do I close it down so I don't feel this? How do I distract myself so I don't feel this? And the answer is not to try to close your heart down or to avoid it or to deny it. The answer is to learn to live with a broken heart. I remember Joseph Campbell. Bill Moyers did a terrific set of interviews with him. And then now this thing I happened to tune into was like a year or 2 or 3 years later, and they were talking again. And Moyers said to him, well, I think you've become identified with follow your bliss, meaning just forget everything and go for your bliss. And that's not exactly the hero's journey. But that's a popular misunderstanding of what you're saying. And what do you have to say about that? And Campbell thought for a moment, and he said, well, something like this. He said, well, the word bliss comes from the French word blessure, which means wound. So he said, perhaps we should say, follow your wound. And, that gives a whole different meaning to the popular understanding of follow your bliss. So along those lines, follow your wound, but with the idea of healing. Healing meaning wholeness. We first have to stop denying that something's wrong, and then discover our natural relationship with the universe and move more and more fully into it. I don't know who it was. I think Proust said, we don't see the world as it is. We don't see things as they are. We see things as we are. And that is the danger of projecting all the time. And so what you do is you enter into this because you need to act, but with an awareness and a willingness to discover where you're projecting and let go of it. For example, we all abhor slavery. We think that's the original sin of the United States, and we're still beginning even to pay the prices for it. But, I'm a slaveholder because I'm using gasoline in my cars, and I'm burning all kinds of stuff, and now I am using up the bounty of the universe. Yeah, my slaves are 3 million year old dead dinosaurs, but I've somehow taken that up and I'm using that to destroy the very thing that I love. So it's as hard for us to give up gasoline as it is petroleum as it was for the South to give up slaves. Our economy, everything we know and believe is right, depends upon us destroying the earth. And so we are perhaps not unlike the Northerners who were abolitionists and wearing cotton shirts back then. And so we inch our way toward this. And through the discovery of new forms of technology and through swearing things off and through laws and enacting laws through our democracy, when we get everyone to, the majority of the people to agree on certain directions, we can begin to take them. Science is always looking for a more objective truth. Science has made a lot of mistakes, but it has the ability to correct them. And so we know that if we follow science, the mistaken beliefs, mistaken understandings will be revealed, and then we can address those. So science has a role in dispelling myths that arise in intersubjectivity. We have to start noticing how the power of belief, ungrounded belief, can be used to dominate objective knowing and objective reality. And we need to come to terms with that. We need to more and more rely on science. The places in our planet who are relying on science are healing and getting through the coronavirus much more effectively than those who are operating off of belief, whatever kind of belief they might have. I'll call them spiritual emotions because they channel and fill us with love. So if we stay connected to love, joy, gratitude, compassion, and other similar kinds of emotions, we will always be able to use science effectively rather than using it for greed or using it for domination. We need to operate with goodness, generosity, love, compassion, and put the technology and science in service to that, in service to the higher good always. Yeah, there is such a thing as getting lost in psychedelics, you could say, or in thinking you can meditate your way out of everything. I strongly believe in action. And creation, when you set up creation, I mean, creation is a mystery. So you're immediately speaking about connecting to something. I remember taking studying with Peter Senge and Donella Meadows from MIT, and Peter was teaching about how to operate in the context of complex systems. How do you know what to do? How do you know that the thing that you think is going to make everything right doesn't actually destroy everything? And what he said is that, or what I took away from what he said, is follow your intuition. Follow your best intuition. And if each person is acting with integrity and following his or her own intuition with an openness, we're going to discover what needs to be known in order to have it work. And
or you sound like you're describing what we call decision by design, not by default.
Very good. Yeah. So we have to trust and know that there is something coming through us when we have the intention to do good and to benefit all humanity. You know, the Buddhists are always saying, I'm experiencing suffering right now. All people are suffering. Okay, so and I'm dedicating my own inquiry, my own healing to the benefit of all people. So when we come at it with that mood, we have the possibility of upcreating, being a channel for some upcreation. So when we're upcreating, we're looking at the future and what we're trying to create the future. I think it's important to realize that we're at the forefront. We're the latest model, but that all our ancestors are standing behind us, pushing us forward. We're at the head of the march across the William Pettus Bridge. We are leading the march. We're going somewhere, but we have so much coming from behind. And we're standing on the shoulders of giants like John Lewis and others. As we go forward, let us know that our bodies are standing in present time. And behind us are all the great beings. And in front of us is everything that's possible. And so we have to honor. You mentioned my family on both sides lost people in World War II, and my dad was wounded and so on. I wouldn't be here because my mother and father would not have gotten together except for that war. And I feel a responsibility to honor those who fell, saving the world as best they could. You know, for generations and generations, the world has been at stake. During the Cold War, the whole world was at stake. During World War II, the whole world was at stake. During the Depression, you go back in time when the plague was wiping out the scourge of humanity. So for everyone, the world as they knew it was at stake, and they were trying to save it. And we can be on the side of those who knew that then, and the world as we know it is at stake right now. And some new world is also struggling to be born. We're midwives.